Sometimes the smallest sacrifice is the one that changes two lives forever. I never imagined that selling my wedding dress would become the moment a stranger decided to rewrite my future. The bell above the boutique door chimed softly as I stepped inside, clutching the white garment bag against my chest like it still belonged to another version of me. The fabric had once carried dreams of spring flowers, family photographs, and promises whispered beneath a bright blue sky. Now it carried the weight of my 14-year-old brother's medical bills. The woman behind the counter smiled kindly before unzipping the bag. Her expression changed the moment she saw the lace. "It's beautiful," she whispered, carefully lifting the gown into the afternoon sunlight spilling through the front window. I forced a smile. "I only need enough to cover this week's hospital payment." She glanced at me with sympathetic eyes. "Are you sure?" I nodded because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure my voice would survive. Noah needed surgery within days. Insurance covered part of it, but not enough. Every overtime shift at the diner, every dollar I had saved, every piece of jewelry my mother left behind had already disappeared into hospital invoices. This dress was the only valuable thing I had left. It wasn't just fabric. It was the future I had spent 3 years planning with someone who eventually decided forever wasn't worth waiting for. The engagement ended quietly 6 months earlier, but I could never bring myself to sell the dress until now. The clerk disappeared into the back room to evaluate it, leaving me standing alone beside rows of sparkling gowns that still belonged to women with hope. Outside, traffic rolled past beneath gray November clouds. Across the street sat a quiet Italian cafe where businessmen often met for lunch. I never noticed the black luxury sedan parked beside it, or the tall man seated near the window with an untouched espresso growing cold. Ethan Moretti had cancelled a meeting worth millions because something outside had caught his attention. From where he sat, he could see me through the boutique window. He watched as I gently smoothed invisible wrinkles from the dress one last time before letting it go. He noticed I never cried until the garment disappeared behind the curtain. Then I lowered my head, closed my eyes, and whispered something he couldn't hear. The boutique owner returned holding an envelope. "It's less than it's worth," she admitted apologetically. "I'm sorry." I accepted it without counting the money. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely louder than the bell above the door as I stepped back onto the sidewalk. My phone rang before I reached the corner. "Claire?" Noah's cheerful voice came through despite the hospital machines humming in the background. "Did you eat lunch yet?" I smiled automatically. "Not yet, buddy. Don't skip meals because of me." I looked at the envelope in my trembling hand. "I won't." It was a lie, but he didn't need another burden. "I'll see you after work." "Love you, Claire." "Love you more." The call ended. I took a slow breath and started walking toward the bus stop without ever looking back. I never saw Ethan step out of the cafe. I never saw him quietly ask his driver for my name. And I never imagined that somewhere behind me, the most feared man in the city had just made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. The next morning began with the familiar scent of hospital coffee and disinfectant lingering in the air as I stepped off the elevator carrying a paper bag filled with Noah's favorite blueberry muffins. The cashier at the bakery had slipped an extra one into the bag after noticing I counted every dollar before paying. Small kindnesses had become impossible to forget. Noah looked stronger when I walked into his room, sitting upright with a paperback novel resting on his lap. His smile made the sleepless night worth surviving. "You actually bought breakfast," he teased. "I thought you were living on coffee again." I laughed softly and handed him the bag. "Do not tell on me," he promised with a grin before his expression became more serious. "Claire, the doctor came by this morning." My stomach tightened before he finished the sentence. "Did something happen?" "They moved my surgery up." I blinked. "What do you mean they moved it up?" "Tomorrow morning." My heart skipped. "That cannot be right." Noah shrugged. "They said everything was approved late last night." The room suddenly felt smaller. Approved. Those words echoed inside my head as I excused myself and walked quickly toward the billing office. My shoes clicked against polished floors while every terrible possibility raced through my mind. There had to be a mistake. Maybe another family with the same last name. Maybe someone entered the wrong file. The woman behind the desk smiled after typing my last name into her computer. Miss Bennett, everything has been processed. Processed by who? She studied the screen. The account has been paid in full. I stared at her without speaking. There must be an error. She turned the monitor slightly toward herself before gently shaking her head. No error. Your brother's surgery, medication, recovery care, and rehabilitation have all been covered. My voice barely escaped. Someone paid everything? Yes. Who? I am sorry. The donor requested complete privacy. I walked out in silence, holding the edge of the hallway wall to steady myself. Outside Noah's room, I watched families embrace, nurses laugh quietly, volunteers push flower carts from one room to another. Life continued as though miracles happened every day. Mine had arrived without leaving a name behind. Across the city, Ethan Moretti stood inside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown office overlooking Manhattan. His financial advisor placed a folder on the conference table. The hospital transfer cleared overnight. Ethan signed another document without looking up. Good. Should we notify Miss Bennett? Ethan closed the folder. No. She will eventually ask questions. Then make sure there are no answers. His assistant entered carrying another file. We also completed the investigation you requested. Ethan accepted it. Claire Bennett. 26 years old. Waitress. Lives in a one-bedroom apartment. No criminal record. No outstanding debt except medical expenses. She worked 2 jobs, volunteered twice a month at the children's reading program, and had quietly become the legal guardian of her younger brother after losing both parents 3 years earlier. Ethan read every page without interruption. There was nothing extraordinary about her life except the extraordinary way she carried it. He remembered the moment she accepted less money for the wedding dress than it deserved without arguing because time mattered more than pride. Most people begged the world for help. She had simply sacrificed something she loved without asking anyone to rescue her. Ethan slowly closed the file and looked toward the skyline disappearing beneath gathering rain clouds. Keep watching, he said quietly. If life tries to take anything else from her, I want to know before it happens. The next afternoon the rain finally stopped, leaving Manhattan wrapped in the pale golden light that always seemed to arrive just before sunset. I sat beside Noah's bed while he slept, listening to the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, and wondering how life could change so completely in less than 24 hours. Every bill had vanished. Every signature had appeared. Every obstacle that had kept us awake for months had quietly disappeared overnight. Yet the silence surrounding the miracle unsettled me more than the debt ever had. I walked downstairs to the hospital gift shop hoping a short break would clear my thoughts. Instead, the cashier smiled as I reached for a bottle of water. It has already been taken care of, she said. I frowned. I have not paid yet. She shook her head. Someone called earlier and left a credit with your name. I stared at the receipt she handed me. There was no signature. No company logo. Nothing except a single printed line that read, "Have faith." I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Whoever this person was, they seemed to know exactly where I would be before I arrived. That thought stayed with me during my entire evening shift at the diner. Customers filled every booth. Coffee cups clinked against ceramic plates while conversations blended into the familiar soundtrack of another busy night. My manager pulled me aside before I clocked in. Claire, I almost forgot. A gentleman paid your rent for the next 3 months. I laughed nervously because it sounded impossible. You must have the wrong person. Your landlord stopped by this afternoon. He said someone delivered a cashier's check and asked him not to bother you with the details. I felt the room tilt for just a second. First the hospital. Now my apartment. Someone was quietly removing every burden from my life one piece at a time. Across town, Ethan Moretti stood inside a private art gallery after hours, pretending to study a landscape painting while one of his most trusted advisors approached. "Everything is finished," the older man said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Did she accept any of it willingly?" "She does not know any of it came from you." Ethan looked back toward the painting. "Good. You could simply introduce yourself." A faint smile crossed Ethan's face before disappearing. "People who have spent years surviving alone do not trust miracles. They trust consistency." The advisor considered his words before asking, "Then what is your plan?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "Nothing changes tomorrow. She keeps living her life. I keep making sure she has the chance to." Later that night I left the diner exhausted, wrapping my coat tighter as a cold breeze swept through the nearly empty street. My old sedan sat beneath a flickering streetlight exactly where I had parked it that morning. I unlocked the door and froze. Resting neatly on the passenger seat was a plain white envelope. My pulse quickened as I looked around the quiet parking lot. There was nobody nearby. With trembling fingers I opened it. Inside was a folded receipt from the bridal boutique. Across the bottom someone had written a single sentence in elegant handwriting. "Dreams should never become collateral." I read the words again and again until they blurred together. Whoever had been helping me knew about the wedding dress. That meant they had been there on the day I let go of the last piece of the future I thought I would have. For the first time since all of this began, I realized I was no longer searching for an anonymous act of kindness. I was searching for the stranger who had been watching my life long before I ever noticed his presence. The next morning I drove straight to the bridal boutique before visiting the hospital, the folded receipt still tucked safely inside my purse like a question nobody could answer. The same woman greeted me with a warm smile as she recognized me immediately. "How is your brother?" she asked. "His surgery is today," I replied, managing a small smile before placing the mysterious receipt on the counter. "Do you know who bought my dress?" Her expression softened. "I wish I could tell you. Please. I am not trying to thank them with anything expensive. I just want to say thank you." She hesitated, glancing toward the office in the back before lowering her voice. "The gentleman requested complete confidentiality. He paid full price for the dress less than an hour after you left. He never even asked to see it." My heartbeat slowed. "Did he leave a name?" She gently shook her head. "Only instructions." "What instructions?" "He said that if you ever came back asking questions, I should tell you that some dreams deserve another chance." I stood there speechless, the words settling somewhere deep inside me. Whoever this man was, he did not simply solve problems. He seemed to understand exactly which wounds nobody else could see. I thanked her and walked back outside into the crisp autumn air. Across the street, inside another black sedan parked several spaces away, Ethan watched quietly through lightly tinted glass. His driver glanced into the rearview mirror. "She came back." Ethan nodded once. "I expected she would. She looks determined. She has survived too much not to look for answers." His phone vibrated softly. The message came from one of his investigators. Claire Bennett had left the boutique and was driving toward Mercy General Hospital. Noah Bennett was already being prepared for surgery. Ethan looked out the window one last time before placing the phone back into his pocket. "Go to the hospital," he said calmly. "Not too close. I do not want her to feel followed." Nearly an hour later I sat beside Noah as nurses wheeled his bed toward the operating room. He squeezed my hand with surprising confidence. "Everything is going to be okay, Claire." I smiled through the nervous ache in my chest. "I know. You always make impossible things happen." Those words nearly broke me because this time it had not been me at all. I kissed his forehead before watching the doors slowly close behind him. The waiting room felt endless. Every ticking second echoed louder than the last. Families whispered nearby while televisions played morning news that nobody seemed interested in watching. I folded my hands together and silently prayed for the first time in years. After nearly 3 hours, the surgeon finally appeared with a tired but genuine smile. The procedure went very well. Relief rushed through me so suddenly that my knees almost gave out. Tears blurred everything as I thanked him over and over. The doctor handed me a folder containing Noah's recovery schedule before quietly adding, "Whoever stepped in for your family made certain we had everything we needed. Your brother received the best care available." I looked down at the folder without answering. Even here, the invisible hand had reached ahead of us. As evening settled over the city and Noah rested peacefully in recovery, I walked toward the hospital chapel searching for a moment of silence. The room was empty except for a single white candle glowing near the front. Resting on the wooden bench where I chose to sit was another envelope with my name written neatly across the front. My hands trembled before I even opened it because somehow, deep inside, I already knew the stranger had found me once again. I stared at the envelope for several long seconds before finally sliding my finger beneath the seal. There was no letter inside. No signature. Only a small ivory card with a single sentence written in the same elegant handwriting I had seen before. "Kindness is never invisible to the right eyes." I read it twice before carefully turning the card over. The back was blank. Whoever kept leaving these messages never asked for gratitude, never expected recognition, and somehow always knew exactly where I would be. I slipped the card into my purse beside the others and walked back toward Noah's room, but for the first time since all of this began, gratitude was slowly giving way to curiosity. I needed to know who believed in me enough to change my life without asking for anything in return. 3 days later, Noah was discharged from the hospital. The crisp November air felt different as we stepped outside together. He moved carefully, leaning slightly on my shoulder, but he was smiling the entire way to my aging sedan. "Home finally," he whispered. "Home," I agreed, although I knew recovery would still take weeks. We had barely driven 2 blocks when my phone rang through the car speakers. My landlord's name appeared on the screen. My stomach tightened instinctively. "Miss Bennett," he said warmly after I answered. "I wanted to let you know that the maintenance crew finished replacing your apartment's heating system this morning." I blinked. "Replacing it?" The old one was unsafe. "Someone paid for a completely new unit. Winter should be much more comfortable now." I thanked him quietly before ending the call. Noah looked at me with a puzzled smile. "Another miracle?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Apparently." He laughed softly. "Maybe somebody up there likes you." I wish the answer felt that simple. Across the city, Ethan Moretti sat alone in the library of his townhouse, the evening fire casting warm light across shelves lined with leather-bound books. His longtime advisor entered carrying a folder. "There is something you should see." Ethan accepted it without speaking. Inside were printed screenshots from social media. Someone had posted security footage from the bridal boutique showing Claire carrying her wedding dress into the store. The video had spread quickly. Thousands of strangers commented on her sacrifice. Some praised her. Others questioned whether the story was real. A handful had even begun searching for her identity online. Ethan quietly closed the folder. "Take it down." His advisor nodded. "Every copy?" "Every copy you can find. People will wonder why." Ethan looked toward the fire. "She gave up enough already. She does not deserve to become entertainment." By the following afternoon, the video had almost completely disappeared from the internet, but not before attracting the attention of people with far less honorable intentions. As I finished my evening shift at the diner, a sharply dressed man approached my table wearing an expensive smile that never reached his eyes. "Miss Bennett?" he asked politely. "Yes?" He handed me a business card from a media company I had never heard of. "We would love to feature your story. Interviews. Television appearances. Donations. It could become quite profitable." I gently placed the card back into his hand. "My brother is recovering. I am not interested." His smile faded slightly. "You should think carefully. Opportunities like this disappear. So do private lives," I replied before walking toward the employee entrance. I never noticed another man standing across the street beside a black sedan, quietly watching the entire conversation unfold. Ethan slipped his phone back into his pocket after receiving confirmation that the reporter's employer had just cancelled every assignment connected to Claire Bennett. His expression remained calm, but one quiet thought settled firmly in his mind. The world had finally noticed her. From this moment forward, protecting her would become much more difficult. 2 mornings later, life almost felt ordinary again. Noah was settling back into our tiny apartment, filling the quiet rooms with music, homework, and endless questions about when he could finally return to school. Watching him laugh while sunlight poured through the kitchen window reminded me why every sacrifice had been worth making. I left for my breakfast shift carrying a travel mug of coffee and something I had not carried in months: hope. The diner buzzed with its usual rhythm as waitresses balanced plates of pancakes, businessmen hurried through late meetings, and families lingered over weekend breakfasts. My manager waved me over before I had even tied my apron. "Claire, there is someone asking for you." I turned toward a corner booth expecting another customer who had seen the story online. Instead, I found an elderly woman sitting alone beside the window, dressed in a navy coat with silver hair tucked neatly beneath a wool hat. She smiled warmly as I approached. "Miss Bennett?" I nodded carefully. "That is me." She reached into her purse and handed me a small white envelope. "A gentleman asked me to deliver this to you. He said I would know the right moment." My pulse quickened immediately. "Who was he?" She smiled apologetically. "A very polite man. Tall. Dark hair. Beautiful manners. That is all I can tell you." Before I could ask another question, she quietly stood, wished me a wonderful day, and disappeared into the crowd outside. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside rested a single pressed white rose between 2 sheets of parchment. Beneath it was another handwritten sentence: "The strongest hearts are the ones that keep choosing kindness after disappointment." I closed my eyes for a moment. Somehow this stranger always knew exactly what I needed to hear before I admitted it to myself. Across the city, Ethan Moretti listened as one of his security specialists finished a briefing inside the conference room of his headquarters. "We have removed the remaining online posts, but someone else has started asking questions about Miss Bennett." Ethan looked up from the file in front of him. "Who?" "A private investigator hired by an unidentified client." Silence settled over the room. Ethan slowly stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. "Do they know about her brother?" "Not yet." Ethan nodded once. "Keep it that way." His advisor studied him carefully. "You are becoming personally invested." Ethan remained focused on the skyline. "No." The older man raised an eyebrow. Ethan finally turned toward him. "I am becoming responsible." That evening I finished work just after sunset and stopped at the neighborhood grocery store before heading home. My shopping basket held exactly what my budget allowed: bread, soup, fresh fruit, a carton of milk. At the register I reached for my wallet, but the cashier smiled before I could hand over my debit card. "The customer ahead of you already paid." I looked toward the automatic doors just in time to see a man in a charcoal overcoat stepping outside without looking back. I hurried through the entrance carrying the grocery bag, but the sidewalk was already crowded with evening commuters. Whoever he was had vanished into the city once again. I stood there surrounded by strangers, wondering how one person could remain completely invisible while quietly changing every corner of my life. Farther down the block, parked beside the curb where I could not possibly notice him, Ethan watched through the tinted window of his sedan until he saw me smile at the bag of groceries before climbing into my car. For the first time in many years, the most feared man in the city found himself hoping that one day the woman he had sworn to protect would look at him with that same quiet smile instead of fear. 3 days passed without another envelope, another message, or another impossible act of kindness. The silence unsettled me more than the surprises ever had. I had grown used to wondering where the invisible hand would appear next, but instead life settled into something almost ordinary. Noah grew stronger every morning, insisting on walking a little farther through our neighborhood before growing tired. His laughter echoed through the apartment again, replacing the quiet worry that had lived with us for months. I kept working double shifts, partly because we still needed stability, and partly because I refused to believe someone else should carry responsibilities that belonged to me. One rainy Thursday evening I finished work later than usual and found Noah waiting outside the diner beneath the small awning, holding an umbrella that looked far too large for him. "I wanted to surprise you," he said proudly. "You should be resting." I laughed, pulling him into a hug. I was tired of resting. We started walking toward the parking lot together while the rain tapped gently against the umbrella above us. Halfway across the sidewalk I noticed a black luxury sedan parked on the opposite side of the street. It looked familiar, although I could not explain why. Before I had time to think about it, a delivery truck stopped between us, blocking my view. When it moved again, the sedan was already gone. I dismissed the strange feeling and unlocked my old car. Inside, resting neatly on the dashboard, was another white envelope. My breath caught. I knew every door had been locked. Noah looked at me curiously. "Another one?" I nodded slowly before opening it. Inside was a folded photograph. It showed my wedding dress hanging inside the bridal boutique exactly as I remembered seeing it for the last time. Written beneath the photograph were simple words. "Some beautiful things are never truly lost." My eyes filled before I could stop them. Noah quietly slipped his hand into mine. "Whoever keeps helping us must really care about you." I looked at the photograph again. "That is what scares me." Across town, Ethan Moretti stood inside the private office of his family estate, while one of his senior advisors placed another report on the desk. "We found the investigator." Ethan remained silent. "He works for a businessman who wants leverage over several influential people." Miss Bennett became interesting after the hospital payments. Ethan slowly closed the report. "Has he contacted her?" "Not yet. Make sure he never does." The advisor hesitated before speaking again. "You could end all of this by simply telling her the truth." Ethan looked toward the rain sliding down the tall windows. "If she learns who I am before she learns who I choose to be, she will only see the stories the world tells about me." Later that evening I sat beside Noah after he had fallen asleep, turning the photograph over one more time. Something slipped from the back of the picture and landed softly on the coffee table. It was a small claim ticket from the bridal boutique. My heartbeat quickened as I read the printed words. The dress had never been resold. It had been placed into private storage under a confidential account on the very day I sold it. I stared at the date until everything around me disappeared. Whoever had been watching me had not only saved my brother. Somehow they had quietly protected the last piece of my future before I even realized I wanted it back. The next morning I drove to the bridal boutique before my shift even began, the small claim ticket resting in my pocket like it carried the answer to every question that had haunted me for weeks. The owner recognized me immediately and unlocked the door even though the store had not officially opened. She listened quietly as I placed the ticket on the counter. Her eyes widened for only a second before she slowly nodded. "You found it." I swallowed hard. "Please tell me who bought the dress." She looked down at the paper and sighed. "I promised I would never reveal his identity." "Then at least tell me one thing." My voice trembled despite my best effort to remain calm. "Why would someone do all of this for a stranger?" The woman smiled with surprising warmth. "Because sometimes people recognize goodness long before they recognize love." She disappeared into the storage room and returned carrying a large ivory garment bag. My breath caught before she even unzipped it. There it was. Every stitch. Every layer of delicate lace. Every tiny pearl sewn into the sleeves exactly as I remembered. It looked untouched, as though time itself had protected it. Tears blurred my vision before I realized I was crying. "He instructed us to preserve it exactly as it was," the owner whispered. "He said one day its rightful owner would come back." I gently touched the sleeve with trembling fingertips. "I cannot accept this." "You are not accepting a gift." She smiled softly. "You are reclaiming something that already belonged to you." I stood there in silence, unable to explain the strange feeling growing inside my heart. Gratitude had slowly become something else. Whoever this man was, he seemed to understand not only what I had lost, but also what I needed before I could even ask for it. Across Manhattan, Ethan Moretti sat alone inside his office while rain drifted quietly against the tall windows overlooking the skyline. His advisor entered carrying another report before stopping beside the desk. "She has the dress." Ethan simply nodded. "How did she react?" A faint smile appeared before disappearing almost immediately. "Exactly the way I hoped she would." The advisor hesitated. "You have hidden behind letters long enough." Ethan rested his hands together. "She deserves to choose freely. Not because she feels indebted to me. She cannot choose someone she has never met." Ethan looked toward the city below. "Then perhaps it is finally time." That afternoon I finished work early and picked Noah up from his physical therapy appointment. As we walked through Central Park beneath trees painted gold and crimson by late autumn, he suddenly stopped beside a small pond where ducks drifted across the calm water. "Claire," he said quietly, "do you think miracles always stay invisible?" I smiled sadly. "Maybe some do." He shook his head. "I do not." I looked at him curiously. He pointed across the pond toward a tall man standing alone beside the stone bridge, dressed in a charcoal overcoat with his hands resting inside his pockets. Even from that distance there was something calm and steady about the way he watched the water. Before I could study him any longer, he slowly turned and met my eyes for the very first time. The city seemed to disappear around us. There was no fear in his expression. No expectation. Only quiet recognition, as though he had been waiting for this single moment far longer than I had been searching for him. For a long moment neither of us moved. The breeze carried fallen leaves across the stone path while the late afternoon sun reflected softly across the water between us. Noah looked from me to the stranger and quietly whispered, "I think he has been looking for you." My heart was beating so loudly that I barely heard my own footsteps as I slowly walked toward the bridge. The man waited without taking a single step closer. When I finally stood a few feet away, I noticed the calm confidence in his posture, the quiet kindness in his green eyes, and the faint trace of sadness that seemed to have lived there for much longer than I could understand. "Was it you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He held my gaze for several seconds before answering. "Yes." There was no excuse. No speech. No attempt to make himself appear heroic. Just one honest word. I looked down at my hands before asking the question that had followed me through every sleepless night. "Why?" He smiled gently. "Because I watched someone give away the last beautiful thing she owned without asking the world to feel sorry for her. You chose your brother without hesitation. I have spent most of my life surrounded by people who only knew how to take. Then I saw someone who only knew how to give." Tears gathered in my eyes again. "You changed everything for us." He slowly shook his head. "No. You did. I only removed the obstacles standing in your way." I searched his face, remembering every anonymous note, every impossible miracle, every quiet act of compassion. "You never wanted me to know. I wanted you to heal first," he answered. "Gratitude can sometimes feel like a debt. I never wanted you to believe you owed me anything." I laughed softly through my tears. "Then why keep the dress?" His expression warmed in a way I had not seen before. "Because when I watched you walk out of that boutique, I realized you had not sold a dress. You had sacrificed a future. I could not give your past back, but I hoped one day you might choose a new future for yourself." We stood together in comfortable silence while Noah wandered toward the pond to watch the ducks. After a moment I finally asked, "People say you are the most feared man in this city. Should I be afraid?" A quiet smile crossed his face. "Only if kindness has become something to fear." Somehow that answer made perfect sense. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan never tried to control my life. He never asked me to leave my job, never made promises he could not keep, and never expected anything in return for what he had already done. Instead, he appeared one ordinary day at a time, sometimes bringing coffee before my morning shift, sometimes helping Noah with school projects, sometimes sitting beside me in peaceful silence without saying a single word. Trust did not arrive all at once. It grew the same way hope had returned to my life, quietly, patiently, one small act at a time. The following spring, Ethan invited Noah and me back to the same bridal boutique. The owner smiled as she carefully placed the restored gown into my hands one final time. This time I did not see the dress as a memory of what I had lost. I saw it as proof that even broken dreams can find their way home when they are placed in the hands of someone who values them. As we stepped outside into the warm sunlight, Ethan reached for my hand with quiet certainty, and I realized that the greatest gift he had ever given me was never the hospital bills, the letters, or even the dress itself. It was the simple reminder that kindness never disappears. Sometimes it waits patiently until the right heart is ready to believe in it again.